Hey, what's going on, you guys? My name is the Raptor, and welcome back to Who'd Win and Why. And this time we've got Spider-Man, aka Miles Morales, going up against Spider-Girl, aka May Parker. Now, both of these characters have taken up the Spidey mantle in their own respective alternate universes, and they both have some unique traits and abilities of their own. But today it's time for me to decide who I think would be the superior Spider-Child in a one-on-one battle to the death. So, who'd win and why? Let's find out! Alright, so first I'm going to talk about Spider-Man. Miles Morales is from the Ultimate Universe, and he gained his abilities after being bitten by a spider infused with the Oz formula, which, if any of you don't know, was an attempt to recreate the original Super Soldier Serum. And while his origin story doesn't match up exactly with Peter Parker's, he did gain some abilities which are very similar to the OG Spider-Man. Miles possesses superhuman strength, speed, durability, agility, reflexes, stamina, and equilibrium. He's capable of lifting over 10 tons on average and jumping great distances, reacting over 20 times faster than an ordinary human can, and he can even take in large amounts of impact force, such as falling from amazing heights and even being blasted through skyscrapers. And when it comes to his stamina, not only can he exert himself for hours on end, but he also possesses a regenerative healing factor, which allows him to recover relatively quickly from wounds during battle. The Spider Bite also gave Miles Morales similar signature spider powers to Peter, such as being able to cling on walls and crawl along virtually any surface, and the ability to sense danger with his spider sense. And when it comes to the spider sense, Miles's actually seems to be greatly enhanced compared to Peter's, to the point where it could actually be considered precognitive, meaning that it can actually sense danger well before it happens, as well as alerting him to immediate threats. And aside from all of that, Miles has also got his own powers. Unlike Peter, Miles Morales possesses bioelectrokinesis, which essentially means control over the body's own natural electricity. And he can use this ability offensively in many different ways. For example, he can generate energy threads, which essentially act as his own personal webbing, which of course he can use for traveling, he can use for attacking, but when it comes to the energy threads, they can deliver an electric shock which can disrupt the target's nervous system, which consequently can do some devastating things, including being able to stun the target. He also possesses what he calls the Venom Punch, which is when he infuses his punch with bioelectricity, which can cause similar effects to the energy threads, and they can also increase the power of his strikes. Next up is the Venom Blast, which is where he releases a small spark of electricity from his hands, which is capable of electrocuting and even completely incapacitating a target. And he also possesses the Mega Venom Blast, however this is only caused when he's under extreme stress. But when this does happen, he releases a huge burst of energy, capable of almost destroying an entire Hydra laboratory. However, after Miles does this does leave him extremely tired. It's also worth noting that all of the bioelectrical abilities do, or at least can do, more damage against characters who have been genetically altered, such as the Green Goblin and the Venom of his universe. Lastly, he can camouflage not only himself, but also his suit, which essentially turns him completely invisible mid-fight. Despite possessing all of these amazing abilities, however, Miles Morales is not without his weaknesses. He is a very bright kid, just like how Peter Parker was, but he doesn't have a great deal of experience being a superhero, and this has shown, and it does sometimes get him into trouble. It's also worth noting that Miles Morales doesn't really have any combat training, except for mostly his own experimentation. But even with his limited time under the mask, Miles Morales' versatility and power make him a dangerous opponent. His accomplishments at just 14 years old show that he's more than fit to hold the title of your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Alright, so now it's time to move on to Spider-Girl. May Parker is from the What If universe, and she simply inherited her abilities by being the daughter of, well, Spider-Man. And while her abilities don't match up beat for beat to her father's, most of them are clearly very similar. Spider-Girl possesses superhuman strength, speed, durability, agility, reflexes, stamina, and equilibrium. And while she's technically not quite as strong as Peter Parker is, she has shown to be more agile and maybe even a little more flexible. She can easily dodge bullets and other fast incoming attacks, can withstand attacks from characters like Hobgoblin and Carnage, and can even get right back up from other impact forces, such as high falls and energy attacks. She can exert herself for very long periods of time, along with possessing accelerated healing to regenerate from all kinds of injuries, despite being only almost as good as Peter's own healing. May also inherited the signature spider powers, such as wall crawling and the spider sense, and both of which seem to be more powerful than Peter's abilities, at least to a certain extent. While wall crawling may not have come as naturally to May, she seems to be able to do more things with it. For example, she can almost send the ability or transmit the ability to objects around her. For example, she could almost like stick to the floor, send the stickiness through the floor, and have everyone within a short distance be stuck to the floor. She can even completely reverse the wall crawling ability to make herself repel, and this can add to her jumps and even repel other people and objects away from her. When it comes to the spider sense, it also seems to be more developed, however not by quite as much. Supposedly, May Parker's spider sense is supposed to be more certain of the exact direction of where the danger is coming from than Peter Parker's spider sense, and this is already the guy that gains omnipresent detection of his surroundings when using the spider sense, so you better believe that her spider sense is really good at seeing sensing everything around her, and she's also able to locate sources of danger much more easily than Peter was. The Spider-Girl costume is basically just a remolding of the costume that Ben Reilly, one of Spider-Man's clones, used when he took up the mantle of Spider-Man, and this costume comes with everything that the costume used to when Ben Reilly was using it, such as of course the standard issue web shooters, which can hold large amounts of web fluid which can be used for traveling and for attacking. And it also comes with stingers, however she doesn't seem to use these stingers too much because she feels that they're too brutal to be used against crime. However, in a show like Who, When, and Why, where it's a fight to the death, all the morals come off. Throughout her time as Spider-Girl, May has had a number of teachers to help her with her combat skill, including Elektra, the Ladyhawks, and even Spider-Man himself. And all of these skills mixed with her abilities has allowed her to do some amazing things, such as being able to fight and defeat Hobgoblin, defeat April, her very own clone, and even defeat and reform Normie, the grandson of Norman Osborn, which not even Spider-Man himself could do. Despite all of her awesome abilities and feats, however, May Parker is still a relatively young girl, and she doesn't have a lot of experience in the Spider-Girl role, which doesn't always lead to the best judgment. It's also worth knowing that unlike a lot of other Spider people, her web shooters are actually on the outside of her costume, which do leave them relatively vulnerable. In the end though, she may have her weaknesses, but she should not be an underestimated member of the Spidey family. She may be a what-if character, but she definitely packs in a real heavy punch whenever she enters the battlefield. Alright, so now that I've gone over both of these characters, it's finally time for me to say who I think would win in a battle between these two. And honestly, again, this fight is extremely close simply because they both have very similar powers to Peter Parker. You know, and that makes them even in almost every category, even including stuff like intelligence and experience, since both of them are very bright kids who don't have nearly as much experience as Peter Parker does. And when it comes to stuff like spider sense, you know, they also seem to be about even, as both of them are enhanced, one more for being precognitive and the other one more for specifications about the direction of danger. However, even though these characters are very similar to each other, they're not exactly the same. There are still a number of categories where there are differences between the two, no matter how small they are. And when you look at all these different categories and when you look at all the differences between them, I do honestly think that Miles Morales would be the winner of this fight. And if you believe that May Parker would win this fight, that's great, that's perfectly fine, tell me why in the comments below, but first here's my reasoning for why I think that Miles Morales will win this fight more often than not. I'm first going to start with the categories where these characters are extremely close, and when it comes to speed, I honestly believe that Spider-Girl has the small advantage. Yes, both of them are extremely impressive when it comes to reactions, as both of them can easily dodge bullets and flip around tougher enemies without much difficulty, but it's actually been confirmed that May Parker's agility is actually better than Peter Parker's agility, whereas Miles' agility is more on par with Peter's. Don't get me wrong, this advantage is still very small considering that they're both about even in terms of running and reactions. They both have extremely strong spider senses, and they're about in the same ballpark in terms of agility because they're both spider characters, but because of that very small advantage in terms of agility, I have to give the extremely small advantage in terms of overall speed to May Parker. When it comes to the durability between these characters, they are practically even. Both of them have amazing resistance to injury, and they can take in a lot of impact force. However, Miles Morales has the extremely small advantage in terms of stamina simply because of his better healing factor. Miles Morales was able to heal the spider bite that turned him into Spider-Man almost completely within 10 minutes, and that shows how impressive his healing factor can be. And while May's healing is also extremely impressive, it's not quite as good as Peter Parker's healing, and it's also questionable whether it should be considered a healing factor or just accelerated healing, which is not quite as good. And this means that Miles Morales could heal quicker from, you know, shot for shot, he could be healing quicker, and that means that he could eventually outlast May Parker in a long fight. And don't worry, this is basically where the scaling to Peter Parker stops. Now let's get more into the categories where it seems to be a little more clear cut. May Parker seems to have a significant advantage in terms of fighting ability. Miles Morales has had virtually no formal combat training and relies solely on videos he's watched of Peter Parker, his spider sense, and his own experience. However, May Parker was not only trained by her father, Spider-Man, but also by Elektra and the Ladyhawks, which means that overall she possesses more skill. Now, it is worth noting that both of these characters do have the spider sense, which means that theoretically they could stand up to the most advanced masters of combat because they could use the way of the spider technique. And just based on the feats that each of these characters have, it's pretty clear that each of them could handle each other, but it is also clear that May Parker has more of an advantage or more of a margin that she can rely on in terms of fighting ability. However, while May Parker may have the advantage in terms of fighting ability, Miles Morales has the advantage in terms of versatility. Both of these characters have the standard Spider-Man powers and equipment, but Miles Morales simply has more extra options. May Parker has her extra wall-crawling abilities and her stingers, but Miles Morales has his camouflage, his Venom Blast, his Mega Venom Blast, his Venom Punch, and his energy threads, which not only act as webbing, but can also deliver a powerful electric shock. And when you look at May Parker's webbing, her web shooters are exposed on the outside of her costume, which leave them way more vulnerable. Now, it is true that both of these characters do seem to have one or two counters for each other's extra abilities, but let's be honest, Miles Morales still honestly just is more unpredictable and has more that he can rely on. However, all of these categories in general that we've talked about are relatively close, or at least they're not enough to actually change the fight dramatically. However, there is one category or one advantage that Miles Morales has that I feel really tips it in his favor, and that is physical strength. Miles is capable of lifting over 10 tons on average, which is very similar to what Peter Parker was able to do when he started out as Spider-Man. However, when you look at May, she's only capable of lifting about 5 tons on average. Now, it is clear that both of these characters can display greater feats of strength when the need arises or when they're under extreme stress, just like Peter Parker. However, when you look at what they're normally able to display, Miles Morales is still twice as strong as May Parker, which is kind of a big deal if you ask me. But it doesn't even stop there. Miles is capable of increasing the power of his strikes with his Venom Punch ability, which is something that May Parker really doesn't have anything comparable to. And it's also worth noting that all of the bioelectrical abilities that Miles has is going to deal a great deal of damage against May Parker, considering that they seem to deal more damage against characters who have been genetically altered, like May Parker, only adding to the power output that Miles is dealing, which ultimately means that shot for shot, Miles is going to be dealing way more damage than May Parker is going to be dealing to him, and that's really the biggest difference between the two characters. Overall, both of these characters share many of the same abilities and are very even in almost all categories, but when you really look at the specifics of their capabilities, you find that Miles Morales holds slightly more advantages and holds the truly significant one. He'd be able to take in slightly more punishment, has slightly more up his sleeve, and packs in a much heavier punch with all of his attacks. While May Parker may have small advantages in terms of speed and fighting ability, I feel that Miles' slightly superior stamina and versatility, along with his greatly superior strength and power, would be just enough to pull through in this well-fought battle. So, in my opinion, the winner is Spider-Man, aka Miles Morales. So guys, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. This fight is extremely close, and I know that it could definitely go down either way. So if you feel that May Parker would be the winner of this fight, that's perfectly fine. Tell me why in the comments below. And if you have other reasoning for why you feel Miles would win this fight, again, that's also fine. Tell me in the comments below. I'd love to hear anything that you guys have to say. And if you enjoyed this video, please give this video a huge like. I always appreciate the likes. Comment down on what you thought of it, what you thought of the video, what you thought of the fight, anything like that. And if you guys could subscribe to my channel, that'd be so great. That would really help my channel out. But no matter what, your view is plenty of contribution. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And next time on Who, When, and Why, we've got Olimar going up against Ant-Man. See you all then.